Hey everyone, we're back. It's day 3 here at the 6.5 Summit. I'm the host, Daniel Newman, and I am here joined by Chris Koopmans, Chief Operations Officer at Marvell, for our day 3 opening keynote session. Very excited to be here. Chris, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Dan. Glad to be here.
It's good to be here. You know, a year ago we sat here and we talked to Matt, and it's great to have you here leading in a big moment. I call it a seminal moment of what's going on in the tech industry. Now, setting up this kind of whole thing for you, right? We kicked off this 6.5 Summit all about this being a bit of a tough year, macroeconomics. Right. In the semi space, I think you can relate.
Yes.
It has been turbulent, it's been a little bit wild, but over the last couple of months, you know, it's been about 7 or 8 months, we've been hearing all about this ChatGPT, about generative AI, but over the last couple of months, there seems to be almost like a little bit of sun peeking through the clouds right now. Love to just kind of get, you know, your overall take, kind of how it's going as a leader of a large semiconductor manufacturer and fabless company, just kind of how you're seeing the market play out right now, Chris.
Sure, yeah, so that's a great point, and it's a good setup. So clearly, you know, there was a great run there for all technology, and certainly for semiconductors there for a few years of massive growth. I think Marvell doubled the revenue of the company within about 7 quarters. And of course, as all semiconductor cycles do, it came to an end. And when that happens, of course, there's a lot to be dealt with. There's inventory in various places, and we're in the midst, and we have for a couple of quarters now been in the midst of an inventory correction that's fairly broad. I think what's a little bit unique about this last cycle is that it's been sort of across almost all the markets. Usually these cycles are sort of led by one market, and now during this last cycle it was all markets at the same time. So the down was certainly painful. I think for being in infrastructure, Marvell was a little bit unique because we're really a pure play in infrastructure, which doesn't have the high highs and the low lows. But I agree with your other point, which is that we're really starting to see, you know, inside of all of that inventory correction, a pretty significant growth driver in this move to accelerated computing for AI. And that's driving a huge amount of change actually within data center infrastructure overall.
Yeah, it kind of came on a little bit out of nowhere. You know, I've been tracking quarter after quarter, and I wrote quite a few pieces, Market Watch pieces about Marvell, and I thought over the last several years, you guys did a very good job of repositioning the firm, you know, through the number of acquisitions you've made, clearly putting yourself in the center of areas like data center, 5G, automotive, and of course, there was a rip. It was an incredible rip, and then with the correction kind of came normalization, but really nothing, you know, of course you got higher interest rates, you got inflation, and that drives down the future multiples, Chris. And so people start taking their spreadsheets out, but they're not really looking at the whole business necessarily and saying, you know, is the strength here? And what is the strength? And for me, one of the things that immediately became apparent, and especially over the last few months, has been you have a really interesting play in AI. But you haven't, this isn't like a new entry point for you either, Chris. The company's long been playing in AI. Talk about kind of the company's historic play in AI, and then how maybe this trend line over the last few months has changed the way the company is thinking about it. Has it changed your story at all?
Sure. No, good question. So first of all, you know, as AI has really exploded into the sort of public knowledge lately, over the past 6 to 12 months, you've seen a lot of companies scrambling to say, what is our story for AI? How are we gonna take advantage of this huge wave? The really fortunate position Marvell was in is we had a story. We didn't have to create one, right? We were already playing in these markets. I think the difference is, as you said, we sort of set the company up with our strategy for data infrastructure. Okay, and that really has been based on the fact that we see more and more applications needing more and more data in infrastructure, and really harnessing the world's data to power the future of infrastructure computing. And the big areas that we focused on were cloud, 5G, and automotive. And cloud, of course, has been one of our biggest growth drivers over the last several years. I think what's different is that in the past, we looked at AI as one application within the cloud. And there were a number of applications going on within the cloud. But AI, what's changed over the last 6 to 12 months, is AI has emerged as the biggest growth driver by far within our cloud portfolio. And so what we outlined more recently is what exactly is our play and our content within the AI sphere. And we hadn't really talked about that specifically in the past, even though it was always a part of it. And ultimately what we see happening now is that AI has become the killer app for data infrastructure. So if you define data infrastructure as the infrastructure to move, store, and process the world's data, there's no more data hungry app than artificial intelligence. And so that's just driven sort of a step function change within what's needed within infrastructure. So for example, within cloud, you can see that the data centers that are needed to drive AI workloads versus standard workloads require an order of magnitude more bandwidth, for example, or more to connect these up, because the applications don't fit within a server or a system. They're spread out amongst thousands of systems over a cluster or even across data centers, which drives like a massive step function increase in the networking bandwidth required to connect all those applications.
So talk about that for a minute. I take it you are in my camp that this isn't like some fad. I mean, maybe we've had a little bit of what you'd call kind of peak hype. We went from, right? I mean, I was doing generative, Chris, with Google Workspace. It was finishing my sentences 2 years ago. And what I'm saying is, like, I get it that now there's like the kind of the app that grandma's playing with and that your uncle is using now to write, his kids' term papers or whatever, is going on. But really, this stuff isn't new. Large language models, this has all been there a while. So I take it, though, you guys quickly realized, unlike maybe a metaverse type of trend, this is pretty definitive, right? I mean, this is gonna happen. It's now just kind of how fast?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So ultimately, if you look at sort of what's happened and why now? Why all of a sudden has AI become part of the popular lexicon so quickly? And I think the real, and by the way, I mean, we've been talking about artificial intelligence and large language learning models for decades, right? Almost since the dawn of computer science itself. And I think what's new now is, first of all, the scale of cloud and hyperscale data centers has enabled a level of training that's never been possible before. So if you want to train a model to be able to pick dogs out of a photo set by searching for dogs, you have to send it millions of pictures of dogs. If you want to be able to have it actually, write and speak and write in normal natural language or create imagery or all those types of things that it's doing now, the data sets are orders and orders of magnitude higher, and that's just never been possible before. And so I think what's changed and what's made it so popular now is that for the first time ever, this power and capability was released to everyone on the planet. That's never, it used to be that the sort of AI was sort of stuck back in the back end where people were trying to think of how can I, change this email application or this search application or this recommendation engine, or so there was sort of engineers and machine learning engineers that were dealing with it. And now it got put in the fingertips of every human on the planet, which then allows everybody to see the power of this, and that the power is so much more than they had thought about even 6 months earlier. And so anybody who's a business owner or an executive within any kind of a large enterprise, you're thinking, how's this going to affect my business, right? How can I take advantage and harness this capability within my business? And not only that, but if I don't, what are my competition doing? And if I don't react very quickly to take advantage of this new capability, then I'm going to fall behind. And so you're seeing an adoption, I'd say, within enterprises and within companies now. I mean, certainly the consumer application, we can all talk about it.
Yeah.
What's going to happen with the consumer application? A lot of the other applications that you mentioned are consumer applications, and we all debate, is this a fad or is it not within consumer applications? But I think within the power and the capability that this provides towards all kinds of industries is undeniable, and I think it's here to stay.
Yeah, I think the coupling of this sort of open internet of data, and then of course all the proprietary high value data that enterprises have is sort of, it's the golden ticket. And we've had analytics tools for some time and predictive tools, but I think this was the moment where it's like I said, the seminal moment where everyone's like, whoa, it can do that. And but there's a ton of work to be done too, because like I said, it's a bit of table stakes. Now whether it's OpenAI, whether you're using Google Bard, whether you're using a Hugging Face model, like these are all just using kind of publicly available. But the networking, for instance, and the fabric opportunity to connect your data, the proprietary data that lives inside of your enterprise to these sort of large language models is this huge opportunity. And this is where Marvell really starts to have its story become really exciting. The first gold rush, Chris, the stock run-ups, it was all GPUs. Who makes GPUs? Everybody went and bought those. The next thing, though, is all these clusters, all of these GPUs, all these data centers, and by the way, traditional data centers and AI data centers, they're going to need to be connected. Talk a little bit about the fabric that needs to be developed to truly, enable these enterprises to realize the power.
Sure. So first of all, yes, I mean, all the things that you mentioned, but all the new models coming out, I mean, that's what's so exciting right now, right? I mean, the general server architecture has been fairly boring for a long time, right? It's been fairly fixed. It's been a fairly fixed pie, everybody fighting for share within that pie. Accelerated computing started being adopted for offload types of capabilities, right? Network and storage offload and things like that. And Marvell played in that in DPUs, but the attach rate is, you know, on a global scale, relatively low, with some data centers being much higher. The exciting thing about moving towards these AI and machine learning as the primary sort of workload is that now accelerated computing is the dominant computing force, and which is why you mentioned everybody was talking about what sort of GPUs are going to be deployed in these networks. But the key word there is networks, right? You don't have one GPU solving all these problems. You need to connect tons of them together, thousands, tens of thousands of them together to solve the largest problems. And that all requires massive amounts of bandwidth. And so, for example, if you take a step back and you ask yourself, what about traditional cloud infrastructure versus current cloud infrastructure versus AI infrastructure? What's the networking opportunity? So today, within a standard server infrastructure, you've got, you know, maybe 50 or 100 gig ports, maybe up to 200 gig ports in each server. Those tend to be connected by straight direct attached copper cables to the top of rack switch, and then the switch network is all optical. But the sort of switch to server tends to be a copper cable. The exciting thing within AI systems is because it requires orders of magnitude more bandwidth, now it's all optical, all down to the system itself. And so, for example, if you take one of these big systems today, let's say an 8 GPU system, there'll be at least 4 800 gig, okay, I mentioned 50 to 100 gig in the servers, there'll be at least 4 800 gig connections coming out of the back of that. That's all optical. And for Marvell, the exciting thing is that's where we lead, okay? We're the leader in optical networking. These really high-speed optical networks require very powerful digital signal processing. And that's Marvell's leadership position as we build those DSPs that sit in those optical connections and drive the signals over those optical links. And so you start to see the opportunity for optical networking to be massively more within an AI network. And that's really been, and by the way, that's connecting systems together, that's connecting clusters together, and also connecting data centers together. Because you're starting to see now with training having been done maybe centrally, inference needs to move more locally, and these regional data centers need to be connected by very powerful networks. And Marvell's data center interconnect optical connections play in that space.
You know, I've been reading some of the commentary in the market, as I'm sure you have too, and some analysts on the equity side, for instance, are trying to do a lot of content math right now, and they're kind of looking at something as simple as, hey, you know, this AI server has, you know, 2 ports, and therefore not a ton of content opportunity for Marvell. I would imagine you kind of see it differently, you know, of course, with what you mentioned, the complexities of fabric, the amount of bandwidth that's required. By the way, the sheer volume of just these clusters and the size of these AI data centers, do you think that the market is fully appreciating, or do you think it's kind of being missed right now, just how big the networking opportunity is for AI?
Well, so first of all, I think there's definitely a lot of confusion out there about how these systems work. I get asked questions about the attach rate of accelerated computing to servers within AI, which is the wrong paradigm. I mean, if you walk into a data center today, you turn left, there's your normal servers, and you turn right, there's your AI systems. They're not attached. It's a totally separate set of systems, totally separate cluster. And so trying to understand this huge sort of tectonic shift in data center infrastructure is obviously hard for people to try to fathom, because we're used to sort of, okay, how many servers, how many sockets, you know, how many ports, and the AI systems are totally different type of a network, totally different type of a configuration. And ultimately, the nice thing is that they all are very, very data hungry. So if you think within, I mentioned earlier the sort of, you know, connectivity within the standard architecture. If you're driving today 800 gig connections direct to the AI systems, you're only doing 200 or 400 gig to the switches connecting racks and racks of systems in cloud infrastructure. So it's already surpassed it in terms of bandwidth. And then you look at this sort of upgrade cycle, right? You see that basically instead of a 4 or 5 year upgrade cycle, they're running at a much faster upgrade cycle. Marvell, for example, has already announced our 1.6 terabit solution. You know, that'll be going to 3.2 terabit, and they just keep, because look, if you really look at one of these AI systems, I said they have, you know, 4 800 gig connections into them. That's 3.2 terabits per second of traffic capability. The 8 GPUs inside that system have the capability of pushing 10 times that much traffic. So to some extent, if the workload needed to spread across systems, you're already limited by the network. So the faster you can go, the more connections that you can add, the more you can unlock that powerful computing power for AI machine learning models.
Seems like it's a bit of a missed opportunity right now. Having said that, I think we're still pretty early in terms of penetration. I want to come back to the penetration topic in terms of where we're at, because I want to talk a little bit about cloud optimized silicon. This is something that Marvell landed, I think the story landed really well on that uptick. And right now, though, as we sort of go into this AI boom, everyone's focused, I've said it a few times here, GPUs,
Right.
GPUs. And I have to imagine for a few reasons. One is we're going to want to do more with less at some point. And the GPUs are great for, large, unknown, big sets of data, but as you start to know your problem, whether it's been Meta or Google, you start seeing, or AWS, they're all starting to build custom silicon for, an ASIC, Chris. This is something you do really well. How big of an opportunity is the cloud optimized silicon as it relates to AI? And is this something that the market is also maybe underestimating, or does it just need more time to become sort of front and center?
Sure. It's a very exciting space right now, first and foremost. In terms of the market understanding or estimate or the future is unknown, and there's massive amounts of innovation that's enabled right now in this particular side of the market, which is really exciting, I think, if you're in silicon, because there isn't just one way of doing it, and we're just sort of fighting for share. Actually, there's going to be all kinds of new innovations in this space, and new innovations drive new value. So within the computing itself, so Marvell, as you mentioned, launched our cloud optimized silicon portfolio, which is basically the ability to build custom compute capabilities, in particular for a lot of these big hyperscale data center operators. And you mentioned announcements of various companies that are doing that. Now, first of all, why would they do that? So ultimately, the way I look at this is, first, why aren't we doing training on CPUs? Because CPUs were built for the broadest possible set of applications. Whether you're running an ERP system or a machine learning, it's a very different set of applications, but they can both do it, just not as well. So CPUs, if you think about it as the broadest set of applications that it can run well, but not great, then a GPU is able to do, especially a GPU, a general purpose GPU, is able to run these AI workloads much better. But still, if you're designing a general purpose GPU, you need to be able to design that for the widest set of AI workloads, whether it's a self-driving car or a search engine or a recommendation engine or an image search, there's natural language processing. These are all different applications that you need to be able to run really well. So ultimately what that enables is for individual hyperscale data center operators to be able to build solutions that will solve a smaller set of problems much, much better. So you can do that either for your internal workloads that you have, some of the ones that you mentioned, where they know the application really well, they can build a much better solution, or even as a cloud operator to be able to offer differentiated capabilities to your customers when you're bidding for these cloud services amongst the enterprises that I mentioned earlier, to have a differentiated capability in addition to the standard capability can be a unique opportunity and a value proposition for these operators. And so that's why they would do it, and you're right. We set this company up to do this, right? We acquired Avera Semiconductor from Global Foundries, which was originally part of the IBM Microelectronics division that built chips for decades for other infrastructure companies. And we took that, at the time we acquired the company, they were primarily focused on 5G, and we pointed that entirely towards the cloud and this cloud optimized silicon opportunity to become the partner for cloud optimized silicon. And yeah, it's grown a lot. We outlined a couple of years ago that was an opportunity that for designs we already won. I think this was our 2021 Investor Day, that we had about an $800 million peak revenue designs won. At that time, the total lifetime revenue of those wins were only about 20% were AI. And now more than half of that is AI, just because of how much AI has grown. So yeah, we're really excited about the cloud optimized silicon opportunity generally, but specifically I think for AI, it unlocks the ability for us to really play a stronger role in compute and adding new and innovative differentiated value above and beyond what's already possible.
Yeah, I think the economics are interesting though, Chris, because when companies do figure out those killer apps, like the ones I mentioned, you can create a lot of efficiencies. The second is going to be power. And no one, we haven't talked a lot about it, and I won't ask you to belabor it too much, but all these GPUs and all these giant clusters, they're power hungry. And so some of this cloud optimized silicon though gives you the opportunity to, when you know the specifics of the workload and what you're trying to do, you can get more efficiency out of the compute, lower power. that's going to be a story, because if we keep growing this utilization, if every person on the planet is using ChatGPT and Bard and using all these all day long, I mean, we're going to see the data center power consumption go from what, a little over 1% to 2 to 4 to 5. I mean, this could be massive, and we do have a fiduciary responsibility to the planet at some point, and I think this is something Cloud Optimized could potentially help with too, yeah?
Yeah, I think that's one of the key parts of the story. We often talk about cost, but remember, if you're selling cloud computing services, you're not selling chips. You're selling an overall service and power, the power that it costs. You have to build a data center, you have to power the data center. That becomes a major part of the total cost. So to the extent that we can build solutions that reduce the power for the same sets of capabilities, it costs less, but also is better for the planet, as you mentioned. And so it's a huge focus, not just of our cloud optimized silicon, but of everything. Even in our DSP technology, it's one of our primary focuses and that's why we're staying on the cutting edge, by the way. Marvell announced the products that we've announced today are in 5 nanometer, our 1.6 terabit solutions in 5 nanometer. We've already announced our latest generation in 3 nanometer set of solutions that we're sampling as well. And ultimately, you're going to see that to become a huge focus. Why do you keep moving to the next generation, right? Because you can get lower power. It's not just about performance. So it's performance in an envelope, performance in a die size or a power envelope that you can deliver. And I think there's a huge opportunity to improve the overall performance per power utilization.
Yeah, we made a lot of commitments throughout the during the pandemic period, when companies kind of really started to come out with their sustainability promises, pledges, commitments, shareholder, and these are those real measurable moments that I think we start to look back and say, these are things that could actually help us get there. And we just have a couple of minutes left, Chris, and something I'd like to ask you about is kind of the overall market penetration opportunity. Sure. So, whether it's cloud silicon, which sounds like it's in very early days, meaning there's a very small number of hyperscalers that have these specific apps that are building it at scale. But also in this whole networking opportunity, how early days do you think we are, and how big do you see this opportunity in terms of Marvell's longer term growth story?
Sure, I think it's very early days. Ultimately, just to put numbers to it, we said that in our last earnings call, we said that we had estimated about $200 million in revenue from AI last year out of a $5.9 billion envelope in total. Now, we said it's going to at least double this year and at least double next year, so it's growing really fast. And $200 million is not small, but it is certainly a smaller portion of the overall infrastructure spend today. And I think we're at the beginning of at least a decade-long trend and a tectonic shift within how data centers are architected and how data centers are built. If you think about cloud computing, for example, in the past, one of the main applications was going to enterprises that were running data centers on-prem and helping them move that workload to the cloud. So all the applications you'd run in your data center, right? Your mail system, your ERP system, everything that you'd run inside your data center, moving it to the cloud. Ultimately, in fact, Marvell announced just a couple of months ago that we're partnering with AWS to move some of our EDA workloads to the cloud, right? That's been the momentum, and that's been the big driver in these hyperscale data centers as a growth engine so far. But now, AI becomes, it's not sort of moving something from on-prem to the cloud, it's actually a brand new application that's being innovated and designed in the cloud from the get-go. And so ultimately, it's a very small percentage of the total deployment today. And I think it's going to be a massive percentage of the deployment going forward. And so it's not a short time. If you think about the total number of deployed servers that are out there today versus the AI systems, it's a massive difference. And if you think about what are the workloads going to be in 2030, it's going to be a lot more AI. And so we're very early days. And by the way, that's good for a few things. Number one, lots of innovation in front of us. Okay, so it's not just, okay, we're going to do this and we're going to do more of that. I think you're going to see more and more innovation in this market and in this space to see how we actually deliver these services at the most efficient possible way. But also, yeah, to be in the networking, it's nice to be in the networking because everything runs on optical. It actually doesn't matter whether it's Ethernet, whether it's InfiniBand, any kind of an application that you want to run or protocol that you'd want to run. Light is the only medium that you can possibly deliver this sort of bandwidth over this latency with this power envelope. And so being a leader in optical networking, we're excited to see all the new things happening in the data center and be attached to all of it.
Yeah, it seems like the safe, short way to summarize that is the opportunity is very big and we're still very early. And I'm saying that with, I'm not being silly, I'm not being jest about it, I'm just mean like, we really are in the earliest days of all this.
That's
and
right.
it's come on really fast, Chris, and I think, like I've kind of said, everybody's got their spreadsheet and everyone wants to know. But look, how many servers do we still sell every quarter? Just traditional compute to do regular ERP workloads and run your office software and store all your data. It's immense. Every quarter we're seeing growth and growth and growth. And by the way, kind of coming full circle, I think AI and technology will be these deflationary forcing functions that's going to actually help our economy as a whole rebound. So 3 years ago, I said silicon will eat the world. Everyone said software will eat the world. I said silicon will eat the world. And obviously, we're seeing this come to fruition right now. And what you're doing at Marvell is going to be a pretty big part of the story going forward. And I just really appreciate you taking the time here to talk about what's going on from Fabric all the way to cloud optimized silicon, Chris. And thanks for joining me here on the 6.5 Summit and opening the day 3.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and really excited about the future of silicon. As you said, it's like a renaissance in the industry, and it's an exciting time to be in silicon.
Great business to be in. All right, everyone, it's day 3. That was Chris Koopmans, Chief Operations Officer at Marvell Technology. This was a great way to start the day. We've got many more speakers coming your way. Stay with us. Catch all the sessions on demand if you weren't able to watch them live. We appreciate you tuning in. See you soon.